Welcome. I'm Eva and this is Eva's Kitchen. Today we'll be making a juicy homemade meatloaf. And to my new subscribers, I say thank you. And if you're new to my channel, I say welcome. I hope today you will learn some tips and trade on how to make a juicy homemade meatloaf. So let's get started. Okay, these are the ingredients we will need today. We have 2 pounds of 85% ground beef. When you're making meatloaf, use 85 or 80% ground beef. Don't use the 93 because the fat content is not there and we need that to make a juicy meatloaf. We also will be using oats instead of breadcrumbs. But if you like breadcrumbs, use breadcrumbs. We'll be using some parsley. We got a tablespoon and a half of parsley. We'll be using a half a teaspoon of thyme. We have 1/4 cup of ketchup. We have a little bit, maybe a half a teaspoon of A1 sauce. I like the taste of it over Worcestershire sauce. I use A1 sauce. We have a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. I mix together a tablespoon each of salt and pepper. And I use kosher salt today. And we also will need 1 egg. So our aromatics today, our veggies will be the onion, red pepper, green pepper, and garlic. So we're gonna get started on chopping our veggies. So let's get started. I will be chopping my veggies today elongated, but I will chop them fine. I will not make them elongated because we want to make them small in the meatloaf. So when we start to mix the meatloaf, they won't be in big chunks. So we need about 1/3 cup of green peppers. And these are aromatics and they have antioxidants in them. And the oats gonna give us fiber. So we're gonna be eating a little healthy. So I will be giving you a tip today on meatloaf. And I hope to keep the fat out of, some of the fat out of the meatloaf. We got our vegetables nice and chopped. We're gonna go over to the stove and saute them. I have some olive oil in the pan, about a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. And I use 2 cloves of garlic. And being that I'm putting the garlic in all with the veggies, because I'm gonna put a little salt so they'll sweat out and become translucent. And with that being, the garlic won't burn as easily. So we're gonna let this cook down about 3 to 5 minutes. Oh, I missed one. I got one a little bit long, so I just chopped that up. And let this cook down for about 5 minutes or so. While this is cooking down, we're gonna go and start getting our dry ingredients incorporated. Okay, we have our big pan that we're going to make our meatloaf up in. And before I put the ground beef in, I'm gonna take all of my ingredients and stir them together with a spatula. I'm gonna put in my Dijon mustard, about a tablespoon. If you don't want Dijon mustard, you don't have to use it. But with my meatloaf, I feel like it gives it a little bit of kick and enhancement. This is A1 sauce. I got about a half a teaspoon of A1 sauce there. And I have my salt and pepper. I have crushed black pepper. And I'm gonna put that in. I also have some 2 tablespoons of ketchup. The spatula works wonderful. You can get everything out, every little bit. We want all those flavors. We have a tablespoon of parsley and a teaspoon of thyme. Now we're going to stir all this together. And the reason I'm doing this, so when we start to work our meat in, we don't want to overwork our meat because we can take the moisture out of it. But another tip, when you're working your meat, if you put your hand in a bowl of cold water, that also keeps the moisture in, because as we work in it, our hands seem to heat up a little bit. Our palms and our fingers heat, and you can stick your hand in a little bit of cold water. So I'm putting all my aromatics and my veggies together. That's why, so I don't have to overwork the meat as much. Now, I'm going to put in my oats. I have a half a cup of oats, and I'm going to let my milk go in so it can soften up the oats. I put in about a half a cup of 1/3 cup, excuse me, of oats. Okay, and let's check on the veggies and see how they're coming. And okay, that looks good. And that gives the oats a little bit of chance to sit and dry out and soak up some of that milk. That milk's going to make it moist and juicy for the meatloaf. Okay, our vegetables are cooking nice. I can smell the onions, the garlic, the peppers. It's starting to look good. It's been cooking for about 2 to 3 minutes now. So we're gonna keep stirring it for a little bit. I want them to get a little bit more tender. Now, if you want, you can also, when you're doing your veggies, you can put your thyme in with your veggies, and it would give it a little bit better flavor, and then it'll take you can get all the aroma from the thyme in with the veggies, but I mixed it in with my other dry ingredients. But either way, it works. Okay, that's starting to look good. I'm gonna give it another minute. Okay, we see oats are starting to look good. What I did was go back and get a little bit of more half and half. I use half and half and not milk. I just seem to cook better with half and half because it's richer. You get the cream and the milk together. So I decided to, we're using half and half and not whole milk. Now, with this ground beef, I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna go over and get my veggies and turn them off and bring them over and let them start to cool a little bit because I don't want to put them in just yet. So I'm going to take my egg and crack it on the side of the bowl. I'm only using 1 egg. We don't need to use 2 eggs because we want to keep that moisture in, and we don't want it to overcook and be too dense and tough when want more 2 or more eggs. 1 would be plenty for 2 pounds of ground beef. Now, you don't have to use ground beef. You can use turkey, chicken, Italian sausage mix. You can mix them all together or use whatever you choose and whatever's soothing to your palate. So I chose ground beef. And one of my subscribers sent me a comment in reference to my stuffed shells. I made it with ground beef. You can also make an alternative with the choice of meat that you use. You can use ground turkey, ground chicken, ground Italian sausage, whatever your preference and your taste. Put your kick on it. So let's get the ground beef in. So I'm using 85% lean ground beef. I'm not using a lean ground beef because you need to get that fat content. I'm using 2 pounds. Now, I'm gonna take it. Make sure your hands are nice and clean. I'm gonna roll it in. Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling it for a little bit because the coolness is there from the meat, and I want to make sure I'm incorporating everything, but I don't want to over mix it. About 15 to 20 strokes will get everything incorporated. So I'm letting my veggies just cool a little bit while I'm doing this, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in and start to incorporate them inside the meatloaf. Okay. Now, I'm gonna keep rolling. Now, I'm looking at my meatloaf, and I'm thinking I might need to put a little bit more of salt and pepper. And remember, I used kosher salt in this recipe. I didn't use regular table salt. And I used crushed black pepper. Okay. Okay. That looks good. You see all the veggies. I'm gonna wash my hands again. And I'm going to put a little bit more salt and pepper and then give it one more massage. Okay, we have our pan ready that we're gonna put the meatloaf in. You can put it in a meatloaf pan, but I chose to use a 9x12 baking dish. The reason being, I lined it with foil, and the tip of the day is going to be, you know how when you're cooking your meatloaf, you get a lot of fat draining coming off of them. You have to continue to pour it out or drain it. So the tip would be to keep from having to pour it out. I can't talk today. The tip would be, instead of doing that, you can put some bread at the bottom of your pan, and that'll absorb some of the fat content of your meatloaf. And the foil paper also will help to absorb it. It'll run down the side versus run in your meat. So I'm going to give this a little bit more of a workout before I form it into a loaf. And we're going to preheat our oven to 350 for 50 minutes to an hour. Now you also can cook a meatloaf in 45 minutes, 30 minutes to 45 minutes by putting the oven at 425 and cooking it high. Now when I'm cooking my meatloaf, I don't put my sauce on when I put it in the oven. I let that be my latter 15 minutes of my meatloaf. So everything seems to be looking good and incorporated. So I'm gonna take my meatloaf out. I'm gonna cut it in half like this to get it out so I can make sure. And then I'm gonna start to form it. Remember, I put that bread there to soak up some of that oil content, that fat that's gonna come out of that meatloaf. And we're gonna put the sauce on toward the end. I don't like to cook my sauce, put my sauce on raw meat. I want it to be cooked a little bit before I do that. So we got our oven preheated to 350. We're gonna cook this meatloaf for 50 to 55 minutes. I might need an hour and I might not. It depends on your oven how fast it cooks. So we'll periodically check on it and see. But you also can cook it faster at 425 for 30 minutes. But I'm choosing to slow it down a little bit today. This could be a This is one of my grandson's favorite. When he was small and he would go trick or treat, we used to call this Halloween meatloaf. And when he comes back, he want Granny to have his meatloaf and mashed potatoes ready so he can enjoy his candy. So this is for Miles. Okay, that looks good. Everything looks good. You can see all your vegetables. It's in a nice loaf. I didn't put it in the loaf pan because I want to trap some of that oil out on the foil paper so it'll run out, and put the bread underneath so it'll absorb some of the oil, because this is an 85% content and it does have oil in it as well. So let's get started and putting it in the oven, and have yourself a cup of coffee, glass of wine, cup of tea, and we'll be right back. Okay, we got our oven preheated to 350. We're gonna push this in and let it bake for 50 to an hour. We might not need an hour, we might just need 50 minutes, but we'll keep checking on it. Okay, that looks good. It's got a few more browning to do. You see some of that oil came out of it, and the bread absorbed some of it as well. So you'll see we have some oil left in this meatloaf. So we're gonna scoop that out. That little fat content, the bread didn't soak it all up, but it does help because it's not a lean meat, it is a fatty meat. So we're gonna get a little of that. So, see, we just got a little bit off. So now we're gonna take our sauce and rub it all over. I made just enough. That's a good eyeball. I don't want it too saucy. So you eyeball it and make it to your taste and how much you like on it. You just want enough on there to cover it. The brown sugar gonna give it a little sweetness, and the mustard gonna have a little tartness to it. And the ketchup is just dynamite. Okay, so we're gonna put this back in for another 10 to 15 minutes till the sauce start to incorporate and get a little dark char on it. So, gonna get that back in the oven. Being that it's already half done, I'm gonna bump my oven up to 375 so the sauce will get a little charred. So, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, our meatloaf is ready. It's nice and bubbly. Ooh, look at that. Just look at that. Just look at the juices running down on that meatloaf. Just look at that. Okay, we can't cut it right now because the meatloaf needs to cool down for 10 to 15 minutes. So the ends are my favorite. I'm just gonna take a little bit of end off of it to see. That's the bread there. It still had a lot of fat content in it, but not as much. So I'm going to just take a little bit to make sure it's seasoned well. I don't want to cut into it yet because it's too soon. We just got it out the oven. But I am going to take just a bit to taste it. Ooh, that was hot. Oh my goodness. That is wonderful. The sauce on the meatloaf, you can taste the spiciness of the mustard, the tartness, the sweetness of the brown sugar, and the ketchup just land a home run. This is delicious. Our meatloaf is ready. We've cut it, it's cooled down. You can do another little taste test. Delicious. Juicy, tender, moist, delicious. Just delicious. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, tell a friend. Blessing. I'm Eva, and this is Eva's Kitchen.